They laughed at us. They always did. Until we spoke the dead language of their ancestors. Ambassador Ethan Voss positioned himself at the edge of the grand hall, his face a mask of calm neutrality as laughter rippled through the chamber. The gathered dignitaries of the Zenari Dominion, a race of towering, serpentine beings with iridescent scales and piercing golden eyes, found his presence amusing. Their laughter was not the light-hearted mirth of amusement, but the sharp, condescending tones of superiority. Your species, one of the Zenari lords hissed through his amusement, has come so far. And yet you still expect us to believe you understand our history? Our culture? You barely comprehend your own? Ethan held his ground, his grip tightening around the data slate, tracing its worn edges as though drawing strength from it. He had expected this reaction. Humanity had always been underestimated, seen as upstarts in the grand scheme of galactic civilization. But they had an edge no one saw coming. The grand hall shimmered with ancient tapestries, woven with intricate patterns that told the tales of the Zenari's storied past. Wars fought, empires built, alliances shattered. Ethan's gaze flickered over them, lingering on a particularly faded one depicting what the Zenari called the Forgotten Age, a time long before they claimed to have risen to dominance. A slow smile touched his lips, but his eyes held something far sharper, an anticipation born not of arrogance but of certainty. They didn't know what was coming, not yet, but they would soon enough. Lord Savros, Ethan said, addressing the most senior of the Zenari Council, his voice calm and unwavering. I understand your skepticism. But humans have a knack for digging into the past. And we've uncovered something interesting. Lord Savros coiled slightly, his golden eyes narrowing in suspicion. Enlighten us, Ambassador. What could your kind possibly teach us about our own ancestors? Ethan tapped the data slate, and with a flick of his wrist, holographic glyphs shimmered into existence above the table. The symbols twisted and pulsed, forming delicate spirals and complex weaves that no human tongue could naturally pronounce. The laughter dissolved into murmurs, some voices tinged with nervous disbelief, others with a dawning realization that something was amiss. The symbols were not just ancient, they were forbidden. Recognize this? Ethan asked, his tone laced with quiet confidence. The hall fell silent. Savros's gaze darkened, his serpentine body coiling tighter. Where did you find these? This language, it is lost. Ethan arched a brow. Not to us. We found it deep within the ruins of Alt-Heron Prime, concealed beneath layers of time and secrecy, long abandoned by your people. You see, Lord Savros, while your kind have erased parts of your past you'd rather forget, humans, we're obsessed with discovery. And we don't stop digging until we find the truth. Murmurs spread through the gathered Zenari. Their golden eyes darted from the floating glyphs to their leader, uncertainty creeping into their proud features. It was as if they were staring at ghosts of their own making. Ethan took a step closer to the council table, the holographic symbols casting an eerie glow across his face. And here's the interesting part. This isn't just history. It's knowledge. Technology. Insights into a time when the Zenari were not the dominant force they are now. Lord Savros's jaw tightened. You're bluffing. Humans could never unlock the complexities of our ancient tongue. Ethan didn't miss a beat. He took a deep breath and, to the astonishment of every Zenari in the room, spoke. The words rolled off his tongue, not with the awkward, halting rhythm of a foreign speaker, but with the effortless fluency of someone who had spent years mastering a language long considered extinct. The sound of it was strange yet hauntingly familiar. The words filled the air with a weight none had expected, carrying a cadence that echoed through the chamber like a forgotten melody. One of the elder Zenari Council members gasped, his scaled skin paling visibly. Impossible, that dialect? Ethan pressed on, reciting passages from an ancient text his team had unearthed. Tales of an empire that had once bowed to a greater force, one the Zenari had erased from their official history. With each word, the weight of truth settled deeper into the council chamber. We didn't just decode your language, Ethan said, his voice steady. We uncovered the truths buried beneath it, secrets your ancestors left behind. A hush settled over the hall. The laughter was gone, replaced now by something colder, more dangerous. Fear. Lord Savros leaned forward, his voice a whisper of barely restrained rage. What do you want, human? Ethan smiled, but it was a sharp, calculating thing. A seat at the table. Equality in trade negotiations. No more dismissing humanity as a minor species. We know too much now, and knowledge, as your ancestors understood, is power. The council whispered furiously among themselves, their once confident expressions now marred by uncertainty and fear. Ethan could see it. the dawning realization that humanity had uncovered something far beyond mere words. He had shaken them to their core, and this was only the beginning. There was more to reveal, more to leverage. He gestured toward the data slate again, bringing up more symbols, each one more damning than the last. You've been hiding more than just language, Ethan continued. You've been hiding history, true history. And the galaxy deserves to know it. Unless, of course, you're willing to work with us, as equals. Lord Savros's gaze bore into him, but Ethan held firm. He had come prepared for their resistance. What the Zenari didn't realize was that humanity's greatest strength wasn't just its adaptability, it was its ability to see value in the forgotten, in the things others discarded. You're bold, Ambassador, Savros finally said, his voice dangerously low. But you should remember, knowledge can be a double-edged sword. Ethan's grin widened. We're well aware. The question is, are you? The chamber remained silent, and Ethan knew they had passed the point of no return. The tables had turned, and for the first time in their long, arrogant history, the Zenari were afraid of humanity. And that, Ethan mused, was the first step in reshaping the balance of power in their favor. He leaned back, letting the weight of the moment sink in. The chamber fell into a heavy silence, the weight of realization pressing down on every soul present. No one dared to speak, the arrogance they once held now replaced by a quiet, uneasy respect. They weren't laughing anymore. The weight of silence in the grand hall lingered long after Ethan's words had faded. The Zenari Council members sat motionless, their golden eyes shifting between the glowing holograms and the human standing before them. It was a moment of reckoning, one they had not anticipated and certainly not one they welcomed. Lord Savros's coils tightened further, the tension in his body betraying his outward composure. You have spoken forbidden words, human. Do you understand the gravity of what you have done? Ethan met his gaze evenly. I do. And I also understand that the truth cannot stay buried forever. Sooner or later, someone would have uncovered it. We just happened to be the first. A murmur rippled through the council, the low hisses and hushed whispers spreading like wildfire. Ethan could see the turmoil beneath their regal exteriors, fear, uncertainty, and a creeping realization that humanity was not to be dismissed so easily. One of the elder counselors, his scales a dull silver and his movements slow but deliberate, finally spoke. You claim to have knowledge of our forgotten past, yet knowledge without context is dangerous. What proof do you have that what you discovered is true and not mere human fabrication? Ethan smiled, his fingers gliding across the data slate once more. Another projection flickered to life. This time, a series of ancient carvings, meticulously reconstructed from the ruins his team had uncovered. Detailed depictions of Zenari warriors kneeling before an unknown force, their once mighty fleets shattered, their grand palaces in ruin. The room grew colder. Savros's voice dropped to a whisper. Impossible. Those records were destroyed. Or so you thought, Ethan replied. Your ancestors might have tried to erase their mistakes, but history has a way of lingering in the places you'd rather forget. And humans, well, we have a way of finding those places. The silence stretched once more, but this time it felt heavier. Ethan watched as the counselors exchanged glances, each calculating the implications of the revelation. They had long believed themselves superior, but if what Ethan presented was true, it meant their dominance was built on a lie. A younger Zenari, her scales shimmering with a nervous sheen, finally asked, What do you want, Ambassador? Surely you do not seek to dredge up the past without purpose. Ethan nodded, taking a slow, deliberate step forward. You're right. We're not here to humiliate you or tarnish your legacy. We're here because we believe the past holds answers. Answers that could benefit both of our species. But if you continue to look down on us, if you continue to dismiss humanity as insignificant, you risk repeating the very mistakes your ancestors tried to erase. Savros's expression hardened, but his tone held a note of reluctant respect. You ask us to acknowledge a past we have long abandoned, to see you as equals rather than lesser beings. That is not an easy task, human. Ethan inclined his head slightly. I never said it would be easy, Lord Savros. But denying the truth doesn't make it disappear. It only makes it stronger. The council sat in brooding silence. The weight of their ancestors' choices and the threat of humanity's newfound leverage pressed upon them like an unseen force. Ethan could feel the power shifting ever so slightly in his favor. And if we choose not to accept this truth you have uncovered? Savros asked, his eyes narrowing. Ethan didn't flinch. Then we'll share it with those who will listen. And I assure you, the galaxy is full of those who would be very interested in your hidden history. It's in your best interest to work with us rather than against us. A long pause followed his words, the tension almost tangible. Finally, the elder counselor, the silver-scaled one who had been silent for much of the exchange, spoke once more. We will deliberate on your proposal, Ambassador. This matter is not one we can decide lightly. Ethan offered a polite nod. Of course. But I suggest you deliberate quickly. The galaxy is changing, Lord Savros. And if you wait too long, you might find yourselves left behind. With that, Ethan stepped back, giving them space to process the enormity of what he had laid before them. He turned on his heel and strode confidently out of the grand hall, leaving the Zenari to their whispered deliberations. Outside the chamber, his assistant, a young woman named Leah, was waiting. Her expression was a mix of excitement and caution. Well, how did it go? Ethan exhaled, a small smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. They're rattled. More than I expected. Leah nodded, handing him a tablet with the latest intelligence reports. Do you think they'll take the bait? He glanced back toward the towering doors of the council chamber. They don't have a choice. We've planted the seed. Now we see how far they're willing to let it grow. Leah grinned. If they refuse, we have contingency plans, right? Ethan's smirk grew into something more determined. Of course. We always do. But for now, let's give them a little time to stew. Fear is a powerful motivator, and right now they're terrified. As they walked through the grand corridors of the Zenari capital, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that humanity's influence had finally begun to take root, reshaping the very foundations of interstellar politics. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that the balance of power in the galaxy had just shifted. And humanity, once dismissed and underestimated, had finally found their place in the grand game of empires. Ethan stood with his back against the cool metal of the Zenari Council building, his gaze fixed on the crystalline spires piercing the alien sky. Each glimmering surface reflected the weight of what had just transpired, and his mind churned with possibilities that stretched into the endless twilight of the alien sky. A slow exhale escaped him, his mind racing with the implications of what had just transpired. Humanity had forced the Zenari to confront their buried past, and in doing so, they had tilted the scales of diplomacy in their favor. But the battle was far from over. They're not going to take this lying down, Leah said, standing beside him with her arms crossed. Her sharp eyes tracked the figures moving beyond the Grand Plaza, Zenari officials whispering among themselves, their postures stiff with unease. You just told an entire species their legacy is a lie. Ethan smirked. I didn't tell them anything they didn't already suspect. I just said it out loud. Leah shook her head, her brow furrowed in concern. They're going to push back. Art. And they won't be subtle about it. You saw how Savros coiled up back there. He's not the kind to let something like this go. Let him coil, Ethan said, pushing away from the wall and adjusting his jacket. The truth is out and they can't unhear it. The real question is how they respond. Before Leah could respond, a low chime emanated from her wrist device. She glanced down, frowning. Incoming message from Earth Command. They're requesting an immediate update. Ethan sighed. Of course they are. Patch them through. Leah tapped a control and a holographic projection flared to life before them. Admiral Rachel Foster's face filled the screen, her expression stern and unreadable. Ambassador Voss, I assume you've delivered our findings? Ethan gave a slight nod. The Council has seen the evidence. They're rattled, but they haven't shown their hand yet. I expect a response soon. Foster's brow furrowed. And their stance? Any sign that they might retaliate? No immediate threats, Ethan replied. But they're circling their wagons. They're afraid of losing control of the narrative. The Admiral studied him for a moment. Keep pushing but don't overplay it. The last thing we need is an interstellar incident. Earth has enough problems without a diplomatic meltdown. Ethan's lips twitched in a wry smile. I'll tread carefully, Admiral. The transmission ended and Leah shot him a sideways glance. Careful isn't exactly your strong suit. It's a work in progress, Ethan quipped, stepping forward toward the plaza, his gaze scanning the bustling movement of Zenari officials and diplomats. Come on. We need to make sure they don't shut us out of the next meeting. If they think we're just going to back down, they don't know us very well. They moved through the crowds, their presence drawing subtle glances from the towering Zenari. Despite their imposing stature and regal bearing, Ethan could sense the cracks forming beneath the surface, whispered conversations cut short as they passed, tense expressions hidden behind practiced indifference. As they approached the council chamber's entrance, they were intercepted by a Zenari aide, her scales a shimmering shade of deep emerald. Ambassador Voss, she said with a measured bow. Lord Savros requests your presence immediately. Ethan exchanged a quick glance with Leah before nodding. Lead the way. The aide guided them through the towering doors and into a smaller, more intimate chamber than the grand hall from before. Savros stood near the expansive window, his gaze fixed on the shimmering city below, his expression unreadable but laced with quiet calculation. He did not turn as they entered. You've stirred the waters, human, Savros said, his voice laced with quiet menace. Do you truly believe this revelation changes anything? Ethan folded his arms, stepping closer but keeping a respectful distance. I believe it changes everything. Your people can't live in denial anymore, Savros. The truth has a way of breaking free. Savros finally turned, his golden eyes narrowing. You mistake our silence for weakness. The Zenari have endured more than you could ever imagine. This revelation, your intrusion into our past, does not unsettle us. It reminds us of who we are. Ethan studied him carefully. And who is that, exactly? The proud rulers of a forgotten empire, or the architects of their own downfall? Savros's coils tightened visibly, but he kept his voice measured. You tread dangerous ground, Ambassador. There are things in our history best left undisturbed. Not for our sake, but for yours. Leah stiffened at his words, but Ethan remained unfazed. You see, that's the thing about humans, Savros. We don't stop digging. We don't turn away just because something makes us uncomfortable. We face it, and we learn. Savros regarded him for a long moment, then exhaled, his rigid posture softening slightly. Your audacity is remarkable. But audacity alone will not protect your people from the consequences of meddling in affairs you do not fully understand. Ethan took a step closer, lowering his voice. We don't need protection. We need cooperation. Your people can either work with us to uncover the past and build a stronger future, or risk having the truth slip beyond your grasp. The choice is yours. Savros regarded him in silence, the weight of unspoken words hanging between them. Finally he turned back to the window, his gaze distant. Leave us. We will consider your words. But know this, there are forces in this galaxy even you cannot comprehend. Tread carefully, Ambassador. Ethan nodded. We always do. He and Leah exited the chamber, stepping back into the dim corridors of the council complex. Leah exhaled sharply. That went well. Better than expected, Ethan admitted. Savros didn't dismiss us outright, which means we got to him. Leah smirked. You think he'll come around? Ethan's expression darkened with determination. He doesn't have a choice. But how he responds will tell us everything. We've planted the seed, Leah. Now we see if they let it grow, or try to burn it down. Ethan and Leah navigated the labyrinthine corridors of the Zenari Council complex, their footsteps echoing against the polished floors. Each intricate carving lining the towering walls seemed to whisper forgotten truths, painting a stark contrast to the narrative the Zenari so carefully maintained, the tension from their recent meeting still clinging to them like a second skin. The towering walls of the grand halls were lined with intricate carvings, stories of victories, ancient alliances and conquests long past. Yet, the truth that humanity had uncovered painted a different picture, one that the Zenari were now struggling to confront. Leah's voice cut through the silence as they walked. Do you really think they'll come around, or are we just buying time before things go south? Ethan glanced at her, his expression contemplative. They're cornered, Leah. They know it. Right now, their pride is the only thing keeping them from accepting the truth. A deep hum vibrated through the floor beneath them as they approached the council's central operations hub. The massive double doors slid open with a quiet hiss, revealing a sprawling command center bustling with activity. Zenari officers moved with practiced efficiency, their golden eyes flickering over streams of data that hovered in the air before them. An aide approached swiftly, his scales a dull bronze, signaling his lower rank. Ambassador Voss, Lord Savros has requested another meeting. He wishes to discuss terms. Leah exchanged a quick glance with Ethan. That was fast. Ethan nodded. Lead the way. The aide guided them through a series of smaller corridors, the air growing cooler with each step. Eventually they arrived at a private chamber, its doors sliding open to reveal Lord Savros standing alone, his back to them, staring out into the vast skyline beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. Savros turned slowly, his golden eyes betraying no emotion. You have placed us in a difficult position, Ambassador. Ethan met his gaze without hesitation. No, my lord. The truth did that. We just unearthed it. Savros studied him for a long moment, the weight of generations behind his golden gaze, before gesturing toward the seats at the long table in the center of the room. At the long table in the center of the room. Sit. Let us speak plainly. Ethan and Leah took their seats, the tension in the air palpable. Savros paced slowly, his tail coiling and uncoiling in rhythmic motions. The council is divided. Some believe we should resist, crush this revelation before it spreads. Others see merit in addressing it head-on. And where do you stand? Ethan asked carefully. Savros's expression hardened. I stand at the precipice of a decision that could alter the course of our civilization. Do not mistake my patience for acceptance, Ambassador. The Zanari do not bow easily. Leah leaned forward, her voice steady. We're not asking you to bow. We're asking you to work with us. The past is written, but the future. That's where we can both have a say. Savros considered her words, his gaze flickering to the holographic display Ethan activated on the table. Detailed scans of ancient Zanari ruins, linguistic breakdowns and cultural analysis data floated in midair. What do you propose? He asked finally. Ethan tapped the display, isolating key data, fragmented records, ancient military strategies and long-buried conflicts that painted a more complex picture than the Zanari had ever acknowledged. A collaborative effort. We pool our knowledge, resources and expertise. Together, we can ensure the truth is used to strengthen both our peoples, rather than divide them. Savros's gaze lingered on the images before him, and for the first time, there was something in his expression beyond guarded pride, curiosity. You are bold, human, he said at last. Perhaps that is why your species has risen so quickly in this galaxy. Ethan allowed a small smile. We preferred determined. And we're offering an opportunity, not a threat. Work with us and you retain control over how this truth is presented. Fight us and, well, you know how persistent we can be. Savros sighed, his coils slowing as he processed the weight of Ethan's words. If we agree to this cooperation, there will be conditions. Of course, Ethan replied. We expect nothing less. The Zanari leader studied him for a long moment before giving a slow, deliberate nod. Very well, Ambassador. I will take this proposal to the council. But know this, if your kind betray our trust, no force in the galaxy will protect you from our retribution. Ethan leaned back, his confidence unwavering. Then it's a good thing we're not in the habit of betrayal. Savros gave a low, rumbling hum before turning his gaze back to the window. We shall see. As Ethan and Leah exited the chamber, Leah let out a long breath. That could have gone worse. Ethan chuckled. It's a start. We just need to keep the momentum going. Leah nodded, her expression balancing between cautious optimism and calculated confidence, the weight of their delicate diplomacy pressing on her shoulders. Let's hope the council sees things the same way. As they walked away from the Zanari stronghold, Ethan felt something shift within him. Hope. The tides of diplomacy were ever-changing and humanity had finally secured a foothold in a galaxy that had long refused to take them seriously. And for once, humanity wasn't the object of ridicule. They had stepped onto the galactic stage with a presence that could no longer be ignored.